Good day everyone. Today I will be discussing the chapter 22 Exile in Dapitan in the year 1892 to 1896. In 1892 to 1896, Rizal lived in exile in faraway Dapitan, a remote town in Mindanao which was under the missionary jurisdiction of the Jesuits. This four-year interregnum in his life was tediously unexciting but was abundantly fruitful with varied achievements, such as he practiced medicine, pursued scientific studies, continued his artistic and literary works, widened his knowledge of languages, established school for boys, promoted community projects, invented a wooden machine for making bricks, and engaged in farming and commerce. The beginning of exile in Dapitan. The steamer Cebu which brought Rizal to Dapitan carried a letter from Father Pablo Pastels, a superior of the Jesuit Society in the Philippines, to Father Antonio Obac, Jesuit parish priest of Dapitan. In this letter, Father Pastels informed Father Obac that Rizal could live at the parish convent on the following conditions. First is that Rizal publicly retract his errors concerning religion and make statements that were clearly pro-Spanish and against revolution. Second, that he perform the church rites and make a general confession of his past life. And third, that henceforth he conduct himself in an exemplary manner as a Spanish subject and a man of religion. Consequently, Rizal did not agree on these conditions. He lived in the house of the commandant, Captain Carnicero. Carnicero was charmed by Rizal's fine qualities and personality. They ate together at the same table and had many friendly conversations. Carnicero came to know that Rizal was not a common felon, much less a filibustero. He gave good reports on his prisoner to Governor Dispohol, and he gave him complete freedom to go anywhere, reporting only once a week at his office, and permitted Rizal, who was a good equestrian, to ride his chestnut horse. So Rizal on his part admired the kind, generous Spanish captain. So as evidence of his esteem, he wrote a poem entitled Don Ricardo Carnicero on the occasion of the captain's birthday on August 26, 1892. Wins in Manila Lottery. On September 21, 1892, the sleepy town in Dapitan burst in hectic excitement. Due to that, the mailboat Butuan was approaching the town with colored pennants flying in the sea breezes. Captain Carnicero, thinking that a high Spanish official was coming, hastily dressed in gala uniform and ordered the town folks to gather at the shore, and himself rushed there bringing a brass band. So the mailboat Butuan brought no Spanish officials, but the happy tidings that the lottery ticket number 9736, jointly owned by Captain Carnicero, Dr. Jose Rizal, and Francisco Equilior, a Spanish resident of Dipolog, a neighboring town of Dapitan, won the second prize of 20,000 pesos in the government-owned Manila Lottery. Rizal's share of the winning lottery ticket was 6,200. Upon receiving the sum, he gave 2,000 pesos to his father and 200 pesos to his friend Basa in Hong Kong. And the rest he invested well by purchasing agricultural lands along the coast of Talisay, about 1 kilometer away from Dapitan. So Rizal's winning in the Manila Lottery reveals an aspect of his lighter side. He never drank hard liquor and never smoked, but he was a lottery addict. During his first sojourn in Madrid from 1882 to 1885, he always invested at least 3 pesetas every month in lottery tickets. So according to Wenceslao Iritana, this was his only vice, his first Spanish biographer and former enemy. So Rizal Pastel's debate on religion. It started when Father Pastel sent him a book by Sarda with advice that the latter, Rizal, should desist from his mahaderas, which means foolishness in viewing religion from the prism of individual judgment and self-esteem. This interesting debate between the two brilliant polemicists ended inconclusively. Rizal could not be convinced by Pastel's arguments, thus he lived in Dapitan beyond the pale of his mother church. So the debate can be read in 4 letters. On January 20, 1890, he wrote to Blumentritt from Paris, which says, "I want to hit the friars who only but only friars who utilized religion not only as a shield, but also as a weapon, castle, fortress, armor, and etc. I was forced to attack their false and superstitious religion in order to fight the enemy who hid himself behind it. Although Rizal did not subscribe to Pastel's religious interpretation of Catholic dogmas, he continued to be a Catholic. He continued to hear Mass at the Catholic Church of Dapitan and celebrate Christmas and other religious fiestas in the Catholic way. So behind the debate, Pastels and Rizal remained friends. Pastels gave Rizal a copy of Imitation de Cristo by Father Tomas A. Kempis, and Rizal, on the other hand, gave Pastels a bust of Saint Paul which he had made. Rizal challenges a Frenchman to a duel. While Rizal was still debating with Father Pastels by means of exchanging of letters, he became involved in quarrel with a French acquaintance in Dapitan, which is Mr. Juan Lardet, who purchased many logs from the lands of Rizal, and it so happened that the some of the logs were poor quality. So Lardet, in a letter written to Antonio Miranda, a Dapitan merchant and a friend of Rizal, expressed his disgust with the business deal and stated that if which he, if he, Rizal, were a truthful man, he would have told me that the lumber not included in the account were bad. So Rizal had read the letter. He flared up in anger regarding the Frenchman's unsavory comment as an effort to his integrity. So immediately, he confronted Lardet and challenged him to a duel. When the commandant heard the incident, Carnicero told the Frenchman to apologize rather than accept the challenge. It is because Rizal is an expert in martial arts, particularly in fencing and pistol shooting. On March On March 30, 1893, Lardet wrote a letter to Rizal apologizing for the insulting comment. On 1890, Rizal's sensitivity caused him to challenge Antonio Luna and W.E. Ritana in the same year. So Rizal and Father Sanchez. Father Pastels, aside from his personal efforts to persuade Rizal to discard his errors of religion, instructed two Jesuits in Mindanao, which is Father Obat, cura of Dapitan, and Father Jose Villaclara, cura of Dipolog. Father Francisco de Paula Sanchez, Rizal's favorite teacher at the Ateneo de Manila, the only Spanish priest who defended Rizal's Noli Me Tangere and argued theologically in a friendly manner, but all the efforts of Sanchez were in vain. But he enjoyed Rizal's company and even assisted him in beautifying the town plaza. On his birthday, Rizal gave him a precious gift, a manuscript entitled Studios de sobre la lengua Tagala, in English, Studios on the Tagalog language. The idyllic life in Dapitan. On August 23, 1893, members of Rizal's family took in visiting him in order to assuage his loneliness in the isolated outpost of Spanish power in the Moroland. Among these were his mother, sisters Trinidad, Maria, Narcisa, and nephews Teodosio, Stanislao, Mauricio, and Prudencio. He built his house by the seashore of Talisay, surrounded by the fruit of trees, and he had also another house for his schoolboys and a hospital for his patients. So in December 19, 1893, Rizal wrote to Blumentritt describing his life in Dapitan. So Rizal's encounter with the friar spy. During the early days of November 1893, Rizal was living peacefully and happily at his house in Talisay, a kilometer away from Dapitan. His mother, sisters Narcisa and Trinidad, and some nephews were then living with him. His blissful life was then suddenly jolted by a strange incident involving a spy of the friars. This spy, with the assumed name of Pablo Mercado and posing as a relative, secretly visited Rizal at his house on the night of November 3, 1893. He introduced himself as a friend and relative relative showing a photo of Rizal and a pair of buttons with the initials PM as an evidence of his kinship with Rizal's family. So in May 4, 1893, Captain Juan Sitges, who succeeded Captain Carnicero as commandant in Dapitan, ordered the arrest of Pablo Mercado and instructed Anastasio Adriatico to investigate him immediately. Florencio Namanan. This is the real name of Pablo Mercado. He was a native of Cagayan de Misamis, single and about 30 years old. He was hired by the Recollect friars to a secret mission in Dapitan to introduce himself to Rizal as a friend and relative, to spy on Rizal's activities, and to filch certain letters and writings of Rizal which might incriminate him in the revolutionary movement. So Rizal as physician in Dapitan. Rizal practiced medicine in Dapitan. He had many patients but most of them were poor so that he even gave them free medicine. In August 23, his mother and sister Maria arrived in Dapitan and lived with him for a year and a half. He operated on his mother's right eye, and Rizal's fame as a physician, particularly as an eye specialist, spread far and wide. He had many patients who came from different parts in the Philippines. Don Ignacio Tomarong. So this person is a rich Filipino patient who was able to see again because of Rizal's ophthalmic skills. He paid 3,000 since he was highly gratified by the restoration of his sight. An Englishman, a rich man, paid Jose Rizal 500 pesos, and Don Florencio Azacaraga, a rich haciendero of Aklan who was also cured of eye ailment, and paid Rizal a cargo of sugar. Next is the water system in Dapitan. In Dapitan, he applied his knowledge of engineering by constructing a system of waterworks in order to furnish clean water to the townspeople. He supplemented his training as a surveyor by reading of engineering books so that he came to know about engineering. Modern engineers marveled how Rizal could have built such a system of waterworks, for he had inadequate tools and meager materials, and his finances were very limited. Without any aid from the government, he succeeded in giving a good water system to the Dapitan. So an American engineer, Mr. H.F. Cameron, praised Rizal's engineering feat. Community projects for the Dapitan. Rizal spent many months draining the marshes in order to get rid of the malaria that infested the Dapitan. The 500 which an English patient paid him was used by him to equip the town with its lighting system. Another community project of Rizal was the beautification of the Dapitan. In front of the church, Rizal and Father Sanchez made a huge relief map of Mindanao out of earth, stones, and grass. Next is Rizal as a teacher. In 1893, he established a school which existed until the end of his exile in July 1896. On March 13, he wrote a letter to Blumentritt which says that he had 16 pupils in his school and that these pupils did not pay any tuition. Rizal taught his boys reading, writing, languages such as Spanish and English, geography, history, mathematics such as arithmetic and geometry, industrial work, nature study, morals, and gymnastics. He trained them how to collect specimens of plants and animals, to love work, and to behave like men. In the Ateneo, the best pupil was called superior, and he sat at the head of the bench. The poorest pupil, on the other hand, occupied the end of the bench. So outside class hours, Rizal encouraged his pupils, to play games in order to strengthen their bodies. They had gymnastics, boxing, wrestling, stone throwing, swimming, arnis, which is the native fencing, and boating. So that ends my report. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.
So, hello everyone. My name is Mary J. Pansakala, and I am the second reporter of Chapter 22, The Exile in Dapitan, 1892 to 1896. So, now let's move forward to the hymn to Talisay. So, Rizal conducted his school at his home in Talisay near Dapitan, where he had his farm and hospital. So, in honor of Talisay, he wrote a poem entitled Hymno at Talisay or Hymn to Talisay for his pupils to sing. So the next one is contributions to science. So Rizal found Mindanao a rich virgin field up for collecting specimens. So with his baruto or sailboat and accompanied by his pupils, he explored the jungles and coasts seeking specimens of insects, birds, snakes, lizards, frogs, shells, and plants. So he sent these specimens to the Museum of Europe. So in payment for these valuable specimens, European scientists sent him scientific books and surgical instruments. So during his fourth year exile in Dapitan, Rizal built up a rich collection of conchology, which consisted of 346 shells representing 203 species. And he also discovered some rare specimens which were named in his honor by the scientists. So the first one is Draco Rizale. It is a flying dragon, and the second one is Apogonia Rizale. It is a small beetle, and Rhacoporus rizali, a rare frog. So the next one is linguistic studies. So a born linguist, Rizal continued his studies of languages. So in Dapitan, he learned the Visayan, Subanyom, and Malay languages. So he knew 22 languages as follows: Tagalog, Ilocano, Visayan, Subanyon, Spanish, Latin, Greek, English, French, German, Arabic, Malay, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Dutch, Catalan, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, Portuguese, Swedish, and Russian. Now, let's talk about the artistic works of Rizal in Dapitan. So, Rizal continued his artistic pursuits in Dapitan. So, he contributed his painting skills to the Sisters of Charity who were preparing the sanctuary of the Holy Virgin in their private chapel. So, Rizal made sketches of person and things that attracted him in Dapitan, and he drew, for instance, the three rare species of animal life. So the dragon, the frog, and the beetle, which he had discovered. So he had sketches of the numerous fishes he caught in Dapitan water. So one day in 1894, of his pupils secretly some of his pupils secretly went to the Pitan in a boat from Talisay. So a puppy of Syria or Rizal's dog tried to follow and was devoured by a crocodile. So to stress the moral of the incident, he modeled a statue representing the mother dog killing the crocodile by way of avenging her lost puppy and called it the mother's revenge. And other sculptural works of Rizal in Dapitan were a bust of Father Guereco, one of his Ateneo professors, a statue of a girl called the Dapitan Girl, a wood carving of Josephine Barkin, his wife, and a bust of St. Paul, which he gave to Father Pastel. And the next one is Rizal as a farmer. So in Dapitan, Rizal devoted much of his time to agriculture. So he bought 16 hectares of land in Talisay where he built his home, school, and hospital and planted cacao, coffee, sugarcane, coconuts, and fruit trees. So later, he acquired more lands until his total holdings reached 70 hectares, containing 6,000 hemp plants, 1,000 coconut trees, and numerous trees, sugarcane, corn, coffee, and cacao. So Rizal also introduced a modern methods of agriculture where he had observed in Europe and America. And he also encouraged the Dapitan farmers to discard their primitive systems of tillage and adopt the modern agricultural methods, and he imported agricultural machinery from the United States. So he also wanted to establish a new Kalamba, but he could not get the support of the government. So now let's talk about Rizal as businessman. So aside from farming, Rizal engaged in business. And in partnership with Ramon Carrion and the Dapitan merchant, he made profitable business ventures in fishing, copra, and hemp industry. So he invited his relatives, particularly Saturnina and Hidalgo, to come to Mindanao, for there is a vast and ample field for business in the island. So he particularly told um, Saturnina that in Dapitan she could profitably engage in textile, jewelry, and hemp business. So he wrote to Hidalgo, dated January 19, 1893, that he expressed his plan to improve the fishing industry of Dapitan. So he wanted Hidalgo to send him two good Calamba fishermen who could teach the Dapitan folks better methods of fishing. So Rizal organized on January 1, 1895, the Cooperative Association of the Pitan Farmers, according to its constitution, which he had drafted, its purposes were to improve the farm products, obtain better outlets for them, collect funds for their purchases, and help the producers and workers by establishing a store wherein they can buy prime commodities to moderate prices. So the next one is Rizal's inventive ability. So one little known fact about Rizal was that he was also an inventor. So it could be remembered that in 1887, while practicing medicine in Calamba, he invented a cigarette lighter which he sent as a gift to Blumentritt. He called it Sulpukan. This unique cigarette lighter was made of wood. Its mechanism, said Rizal, is based on the principles of compressed air. So during his exile in Dapitan, he invented a machine for making bricks. This machine could manufacture about 6,000 bricks daily. So the next one is My Retreat. So in February 1895, Doña Teodora, with her eyesight fully restored, returned to Manila. During her long stay in Dapitan, she saw how busy her talented son was and regretted that he had neglected the muses. So she requested him to write a poetry again. So in response to her request, Rizal wrote a beautiful poem about his Syrian life as an exile in Dapitan and sent it to her on October 22, 1895. So this poem was Mi Ritero or My Retreat, which is acclaimed by literary critics as one of the best ever penned by Rizal. So the next one is Rizal and Josephine Bracken. So Rizal felt lonely in the pit, and so he needed somebody to cheer him up. So in God's own time, this somebody came to the pitan, and she was Josephine Bracken, an Irish girl. So Rizal and Josephine fell in love with each other at first sight. So after a whirlwind romance of 1 month, they agreed to marry. But Father Obak, the priest of the Pitan, refused to marry then without the permission of the Bishop of Cebu. So when Mr. Taffer is siya yung nag-adapt ni Josephine, and he is also blind, dili siya kakita. So when Mr. Taffer heard of their projected marriage, he fluttered up in a violent rage. So he tried to commit suicide by cutting off his throat with a razor. So Rizal, however, grabbed his wrist and prevented him from killing himself. So Rizal and Josephine lived happily in Dapitan. At one time, Rizal wrote a poem for Josephine entitled Josephine, Josephine. So Rizal was extremely happy because Josephine was expecting a baby, but unfortunately he played a prank on her, frightening her so that she prematurely gave birth to an month baby boy, so who lived for only 3 hours. So this lost son of Rizal was named Francisco in honor of Don Francisco, the hero's father, and was buried in the Pitan. So now let's talk about Rizal and the Katipunan. So there was a secret revolutionary society called Katipunan, which he founded on July 7, 1892. So in a secret meeting of Katipunan at a little river called Bitukang Manok near the town of Pasig on May 2, 1896, Dr. Pio Valenzuela was named emissary to Dapitan. So in order to inform Rizal of the plan of the Katipunan to launch a revolution for freedom's sake. So Rizal objected to Bonifacio's audacious project to plunge the country in blood revolution. So he was of the sincere belief that it was premature for two reasons. The first one is the people are not ready for a revolution, and the second one is arms and funds must first be collected before raising the cry of revolution. So he also disapproved of the other plan of the Katipunan to rescue him because he had given his work of honor to the Spanish authorities and he did not want to break it. So volunteers as military doctor in Cuba. So months before the Katipunan contracted him, Rizal had offered his services as military doctor in Cuba, which was then in the throes of revolution and the raging yellow fever um, epidemic. So there was a shortage of physicians to minister to the needs of the Spanish troops and the Cuban people. So it was Blumentritt who told him of the deplorable health situation in war-ridden Cuba and advised him to volunteer as army physician there. So acting upon Blumentritt's advice, Rizal wrote to Governor General Ramon Blanco, Despojelo's successor, on December 17, 1895, offering his services as military doctor in Cuba. So wala man siya replyan, so wala na lang siya nag-expect nga replyan pa gid siya. So a letter from Governor Blanco dated July 1, 'di ba? Imagine ni send siya og December then gi-replyan siya July na. So July 1, 1896 arrived in Dapitan notifying him to the acceptance of his offer. So the second to the last is the song of the traveler. So great was Rizal's joy in receiving the gladsome news from Malacanang. So it was with his joyous thought of resuming his travels that he wrote his heart-warming poem El Canto del Viajero, or the Song of the Traveler. And the last one is Adios Dapitan. So on July 31, 1896, year Rizal's 4-year exile in Dapitan came to an end. So at midnight of the date, he embarked on board the steamer Hispania. He was accompanied by Josephine, Narcissa, Angelica, Narcissa's daughter, his 3 nephews, and 6 pupils. So almost all the Dapitan folks, young and old, were at the shore to bid him goodbye. So, as farewell music, the town brass band strangely played the dolorous funeral march of Chopin. So, when he could no longer see the dim shoreline, he sadly went to his cabin and wrote in his diary, I have been in that district 4 years, 13 days, and a few hours.